Hello and welcome to Upper Pen. My name is Dakota, and today I'm speaking with Seanan McGuire about her recently released horror novel, Overgrowth. Thank you for being here, Seanan.
Thank you for having me.
I didn't know didn't know much about your books until I found A. Deborah Baker, which is
hmm
funny because they're such weird little fun kind of kids stories.
Yeah,
Uh,
the A. Deborah Baker books are explicitly middle grade. They're written to appeal to 9 to 15-year-olds, roughly.
okay. And so far, do you only have
Hmm.
the one series in that
Yes,
under?
and it is unlikely that we're going to do much more under A. Deborah Baker because that series is actually written as an actualization of an in-world series from the Alchemical Journeys books.
Well, you also have Mira Grant, which
I do.
I thought was a young adult name, but I don't know if that's the case anymore.
No, the only young Mira has written one young adult book, and I can see it on the shelf behind you. It's Alien Echo,
Yes.
which was explicitly commissioned as a young adult book. But apart from that, Mira does write adult books. For some people, the distinction is sex, and if you make the distinction sex, then everything I write is young adult because I don't enjoy writing sex. It's not fun for me. But by that definition, Stephen King is also young adult.
Yes.
And so are just most science fiction authors from pre 1995 or so. I don't think of myself as a young adult author, and that is important largely because my books do contain swearing and a remarkable amount of violence. And it turns out that parents don't like it when you hand them books and say, this is young adult. And then their 12-year-old comes up to you going, Mommy, what does it mean when you unzip somebody?
Okay. No, I get the distinction now between A. Deborah Baker and maybe the other two.
Yeah. Shannon and Mira can both write YA, but prefer not to. A. Deborah Baker writes middle grade because she is using it as an instrument with which to remake reality.
And so those books are so fun, and I am clearly not a young person, and I still love them so much. They're very cool.
I'm really glad. I really enjoyed writing them. It was super fun. And I don't think that there is any hard limit on reading or watching or enjoying young adult or children's media. Some of my favorite books are still children's books that I read when I was a children. And because you never stop being 9 or 19 or 29 or whatever, they're all just stuck inside you like little nesting dolls. And sometimes you need to give them enrichment.
Yes. And I feel these books are so good at that too, because they're facing real challenges, these characters, and some of them are quite scary. They are very young protagonists, so I get the young adult moniker.
Yeah, the children are young because they are middle grade books,
Yeah.
so they're not even young adult, they're pre-young adult. But from having read the books I read as a kid before young adult was even a moniker, it was kids' books and adults' books. The kids frequently had more dangerous things happen to them because they were better at shrugging them off. You can turn a child into a living paper model of themselves and then back again, and they're not going to have any existential dread or anxiety over it. That's just a thing that happened. It might as well happen. Yesterday, I found out that if you put peppermint into Coca-Cola, it will explode. That might as well happen. So many things are magical and mysterious to kids because they lack context that you can really terrorize them hard in fiction. In fiction, I am not in the business of terrorizing real children.
You also write under Seanan McGuire, though. So
My actual name.
is this where you started in writing then under Seanan?
Yes, I started, well, technically, I started in writing under a fanfic pseudonym that I will not reveal, but I started publishing under Shannon because that is my real name. And because honestly, I did not want to have all of my work credited to someone else. And that does actually happen. I have had people tell me that I would have better sales if I was as good a writer as Mira Grant.
Oh gosh.
And there really is no response to that. I just sort of looked at them flatly for a little while and then wandered off. But yeah, no, Seanan was the start, and my first book sold and published was Rosemary and Rue, which is a Seanan McGuire book. It's the first of the October Day books, and I am currently working on editing a much further along in the series October Day book. I think I'm on number 20 over here.
So
So,
under Seanan McGuire, you have October Day and the Encrypted, right?
and Encrypted, and Wayward Children, and
Yes.
Alchemical Journeys, and Velveteen Verses, and Ghost Spider, and the Ghost Road books, and indexing.
I can't imagine how you write so much. Uh, I'm very impressed.
Well, we started this interview 10 minutes late. You had to send me an email to go, did you hit the login? And that's because I've been up and writing since 5 a.m. my time. So
Oh,
I was just completely like time loses all meaning when I'm working. But that is most of how I don't have much of a social life. When I do have a social life, I have it very intensely for like 5 days. And then I go back to not needing to have a social life for 3 to 4 months. And that leaves a lot of time for writing.
but you've also been writing these books for a considerable amount of time. I'm thinking like October Day in particular, because you're on book much
20.
further than one.
Yes. The first October Day book came out in September of 2009. And with the exception of 2024, we've had at least one book a year. A couple years had two books, early in when that was the only series I was writing, and then 2023 when we put out Sleep No More and The Innocent Sleep. But it's been very consistent, and they have continued along at a nice, reliable pace, which is good for my brain.
Do you still enjoy writing that story though?
I do. Writing Toby is very much like coming home, because I have been doing it for so long. You know, the first book came out in 2009, but I started the first book, the very first draft of what would eventually become the first book in 1990. I
Oh,
wrote and rewrote that book for years on years on years, trying to get good enough to say what I was trying to say where other people could understand it. I think the biggest hurdle most young writers have to overcome is that we know what we mean. We know, and we're writing it down in words that we think mean what we want to say, but then we don't necessarily say what we mean, or we say it in a way that leaves way too much room for other people to misinterpret, or we say it in ways that we don't necessarily have the capacity or the perspective to think all the way through.
okay.
I started the October Day books because I was going to be a folklorist. That was my goal. I went to university for a folklore degree. Um, Turns out that there really aren't a lot of jobs for folklorists. That is not a thing you can just do anymore. And I wanted to be a teacher when I first started out. I'm like, I'm going to pass along knowledge to young minds. I'm going to be a folklore teacher. No, I'm not. I don't like people enough for that. I really don't like dealing with the parents of people who are still in the school system because I didn't want to teach college initially. I wanted to teach high school.
Oh.
And then I watched the parents of some of my peers and some of my younger sister's peers once I was out of high school, but they were still there, drive some of the best teachers in our district away. Because if this teacher flunked my darling little Georgia, they must have some sort of bias. They must be evil. The problem cannot possibly be that Georgia refused to take notes if her nails were drying and she painted her nails every day. You know, it's there are bad teachers out there, but there are a lot more parents that are absolutely convinced that their children are the second coming of Shakespeare and that it's just the teachers that are somehow oppressing them. And I realized that if I did tried to do that professionally, if I went into that profession, I was going to go to jail. So I started writing novels instead and tried to put my folklore degree to good use. But because of that, I spent legitimately years studying the topics that the Toby books are based around. And I'm just trying to justify my college degree over here. Like I wrote an entire graduate thesis on the Ballad of Tam Lin. So yeah, I'm gonna just write my
Whoa.
80 book Tam Lin fanfic until I'm tired of it.
Um, Kind of a side tangent, but I I was in my master's for anthropology folklore when the
Oh
pandemic hit.
wow.
Yeah. So that might be why I love your writing so much, though, is because it is so detailed. It is so, it's not overwhelming, though. It feels like someone telling me a story. And maybe that's
Thank you.
it.
Yeah, on the telling you a story bit, normally the publication cycle is so long and the
Oh,
writing cycle on a book is so long that anyone who says, I think this author did this thing in response to my review or in response to my commentary is just wrong.
yeah.
And I don't say that to be mean. I say that because there is not time. We cannot have a discussion today that influences the book that comes out next year. That's not possible. But with the A. Deborah Baker books, they're very short, and I write very fast. So I was actually able to be reading reviews of the first two books as I was finishing the last two books. And I do read reviews, just not on Goodreads and Amazon.
Yeah.
And those books are very much modeled after the style of children's literature that was popular at the turn of the 20th century. There are intentional stylistic things included all through those books because you would find them in Oz and you would find them in Narnia and you would find them in all of these places where people were writing an answer to the literary trends of the time. And I did hit a review of the Up and Under books that was like, I really cannot stand the semi-omniscient narrator. It I really hate this semi-omniscient narrator butting in. And I wish the author would stop that. And that is one of those things that is extremely stylistically common in children's
Yeah.
books of the specific time period where these books were written. So, book four, I think chapter two, is just a long digression by the semi omniscient narrator about the fact that you cannot read the same book twice. Rereading is always a different experience, and it fits the book, it fits the tone, but it was explicitly and directly a response to that one reviewer. Just like, okay, you have said you do not like the thing. I am going to intensify the thing. Let's see how hard I can do the thing. Can I do the thing for 8,000 words without pausing to take a breath? Yes, I can.
That's impressive, being able to put that in 8,000 words.
It was fun.
Well, so that kind of boggles my mind though, because most young people literature for forever was written in that particular style, at least
Exactly.
Western literature. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't get the pushback.
So part of why I don't give my fanfic pseudonym anymore, I used to be much freer with it, is because people who had purchased and read my books that they paid for, that had a professional editorial team editing them, started reading my fanfic and reviewing it like it was something they had paid for and something that it had a paid editorial team, not just me typing as hard as I could at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. And that took a lot of the joy out of fanfic for me for a while. It was like, your review is not unreasonable, but it is unfair. You are reviewing this thing as something that it is not. The lasagna that I make for a Friday night dinner is not the lasagna that you paid $300 a plate for at a Michelin star restaurant. And it's not fair of you to come into my kitchen and review it as if it were. So, for some people, because the Up and Under books are connected to an adult series, I think that they felt obligated to read them and
Ah,
then tried to review them as if they were adult books.
yeah.
And it's like, but they're not.
Very, very much not. And not in a bad way. These are like a nice breath of like really wonderful writing for younger people even. It just so.
Well, some people have managed to pick up Alien Echo and not realize that it was connected to the Alien franchise. I don't actually understand how. I mean, the Alien franchise doesn't own the word alien, but the
Yeah,
egg is reflected in the eyes of the girls on the cover, so there's a certain amount of like how.
I'm
I
pretty
don't
sure
mean to, I don't mean to be insulting, but how did you do that?
on the back blurb, I'm pretty sure it references Alien in particular.
Yeah, but so I've had people pick up that book and read it not realizing that it was connected to the Alien franchise, and then get mad because I didn't explain the biology of the alien creatures well enough. And I'm like, well, I didn't need to because it was connected to the Alien franchise, which you were presumably coming from. I would like an adult, please. So, I think people just bring their expectations of a book with them to the book, and sometimes that has a negative impact on their relationship with the book.
Are these like in-person encounters that you can just walk away from, or are they like,
Sometimes, but the issue there is I can't walk away from any in-person encounter. Because if someone is coming up to me and going, "Oh my God, you're Mira Grant," or "Oh my God, you're Seanan McGuire," whatever, I am the equivalent of a low-level celebrity in that encounter.
yeah.
And therefore, I have to be on a level of people-pleasing civility that is very difficult for me. We have Worldcon. The World Science Fiction Convention is coming up in a week. And I don't like going to Worldcon. I have not liked going to Worldcon since the first time I had a book out. Because people will come directly up to me in public places and say, I did not vote for you for the Hugo Award this year. I'm like, I didn't need to know that. Why would you don't have to vote for me. No one owes voting for me. My own mother doesn't owe voting for me. But why would you come right up to me and tell me that you didn't? Maybe I'm going to carry white this whole building one day when you don't nominate me for prom queen. We don't know. Go away.
Okay, I'm gonna move on because I'm gonna get really mad. The book that I read most recently was Overgrowth, and
Yay.
I got this wonderful, beautiful copy from Owl Crate, and
It's
I also
beautiful.
got the audiobook because apparently I can't sit down and read for more than 30 minutes at a time anymore.
That happens.
But your framing of the story is so cool. You start off with this is a story. It can't hurt you. How did you get to that framing of the story?
So the important thing to know about overgrowth, and this is neither a joke nor an exaggeration, is that it is autobiographical. When I was 3, I got lost in the woods behind my grandparents' house, and it took them 3 days to find me. After 3 days, I just came back out of the woods in the same clothes I'd had when I vanished, which were nowhere near dirty enough for me to have been in the woods for 3 days. They did take me to a doctor. There was no sign that anything had been done to me. I was fine. But I came out of the woods, and the first thing I did was march up to my mother and tell her that the aliens had taken her baby, but it was okay because I was here now. I don't remember this at all. I was 3. But it is a story that my family has consistently been telling me my entire life that this is what happened. And because I don't remember it, I have never been able to say whether that is something that actually happened. Like, did the aliens take the original version of me and leave me here in her place? Did I see a really big owl and decide it was an alien and that I had been taken? Did I have a very vivid dream? I don't know. I was there, but I was 3, and 3-year-olds don't encode memory like that. So when I finally wanted to write Overgrowth, it was important that I find a way to keep that family framing story that it had been a story for always in the book. And that led me to this is a story.
Okay. Because that anecdote is written in the beginning of this version. I don't know if it's in every
Hmm.
version, but it's like a nice little here's here's how this started.
Yeah, it was the author's letter that they had me do.
Yeah.
But the fun thing there was that I had at least one editor who wanted me to somehow take my child murder book opening and lean more into it, make it like a fairy tale. And I'm like, that is very Brothers Grimm. Very, very Brothers Grimm. But back to reviewers, I did have one reviewer who said that the book had read as very YA to them. And I'm like, does every YA novel you read open with the brutal murder of a 3-year-old?
But also, isn't Stasia in her 30s? Like,
Well, she's in her 30s once the book starts. And I'm like, okay, the main character is way too old for a YA novel. But even apart from that, if I picked up a YA novel for my goddaughter who is 11 and it started with the brutal murder of a 3-year-old, I would take it away from her again before her parents found out.
so it does have some lovely imagery in it, but it also has
Mhm.
very adult language with the idea of, because you start with the formation of the earth even, and then
Yeah.
the seeding of it, and that is very high concept to me, and not, I don't think a child would care or fully
I mean,
grasp.
there's going to be a child that cares, but I don't
Yeah,
think
but
enough children would care to make the book worth publishing.
I guess there was the really pretty flower that I guess that's childlike.
Yeah, yeah. Adults like really pretty flowers too. But yeah, no, I got there from my own experience and from my own in I honestly do endlessly wonder whether the Armada is coming, or whether I just saw a really pretty owl.
But you haven't been warning everybody the Armada is coming,
Oh,
have
I
you?
have.
Oh,
That part is also actually drawn from life. Like I used to, when I was in elementary school, I blew up a bunch of friendships because very shortly after meeting people, I would inform them that I was the vanguard of an invading species of alien plants on its way to destroy and decimate this puny planet. And the wording mostly did not vary over the course of years, warning people forever. And unfortunately, it is too late now. You have both been warned and been told why you were warned, so it no longer works to say, please don't.
uh,
Also, quite frankly, at this point, this planet could use a good armada-ing.
so that's kind of interesting that you blew up friendships because of this, because that's the problem that Stasia has, and I'm sure it's because you've lived this experience, but
Hmm.
she also ends up post-college with a bunch of roommates that like her and just kind of dismiss this alien thing, even though she's constantly saying it. I thought that was so weird and kind of funny, but like,
Well, think about it. If I tell you, as I have told you, that that part of the book is autobiographical, you don't immediately mentally refile me as an alien life form. You just go, oh, well, science fiction authors are allowed to be a little quirky.
yeah.
Stacia is consistent, has always been consistent, and most of the people that you see who like her in the book have known her since college. And in college, I think, especially those of us that go to liberal arts schools, we tend to be a little bit more forgiving of. I knew a werewolf in college. He swore he was a werewolf, and he lived his life as if he were a werewolf. I never saw him turn into a wolf. I don't necessarily think that he was a werewolf, but in college, I did the mental math of which is better. Yes, you're a werewolf. Yes, you're my friend. You can have your hamburgers basically raw. I'm going to constantly watch for signs of food poisoning, but I have a friend. Look, I have a friend and he's better than I am at calculus and can help me with my homework. Or you, sir, are some sort of pejorative for mental health. You really need to get away from me. And now I've got a guy who thinks he's a werewolf that has no friends and no support structure, whereas I could have been part of his support structure. So I knew a werewolf. I knew witches who could control the moon and all of that. I knew one guy who swore that his family was from Innsmouth originally.
Oh, okay.
He was on the swim team and he could hold his breath for an exceptionally long period of time.
10
But
minutes or whatever it is.
he was very firm that one day his gills would open and his transmutation into a deep one would begin. And so it's like in college, this is much more normal. People are figuring out not only who they are, but who they want to be and what their mythology of the self is going to be.
Mhm.
And so they kind of roll with that. And Stacia, all her friends are people she met when she was in college
Yeah,
who were in that accepting mode. And then when she kept insisting she was an alien, we're just like, well, at least she's consistent.
that's fair. That is very fair. And the only one who's really mean about it is her roommate's girlfriend, who
Yeah,
seems,
her
mm,
who they she didn't meet while she was in college.
Yeah.
And her roommate's girlfriend is kind of that other side of the acceptingness where sometimes you'll make a new friend, you'll join a social group, and you'll discover that they have an alien plant person in their midst, or a werewolf, or whatever, that you just can't accept because you didn't meet them when you had that openness going on.
Okay. Yeah. The so these things all explain the dynamics, and I just kind of wrote it off as like, oh yeah, that's cool. She's got to have some way to go about this. I didn't think too deeply on it, I guess.
One thing you will find with me, and it is both a good thing and a bad thing, is I think through everything.
Okay.
My editorial passes generally begin with my agent calling and just starting to ask me random questions because she knows I'll have an answer.
Okay.
And sometimes she takes the answer and goes, okay, we'll figure this out. And other times she goes, okay, cool, that makes sense to you. You are from space. Please figure out how to make it make sense to someone who is not from space.
Not only do you have all of this um kind of like you know everything about the universe, but you also are incorporating so much of our real world into the book.
Mhm.
And I think it's most easily seen with Stasia and Graham going to the airport. But like the two of them going to the airport and them both being afraid for very different reasons about being pulled out of the like TSA line. So how how do you merge those two things? This is like a very science fiction-y place that you have all this like kind of knowledge for in your head, but then you're also trying to marry it with the real world.
Sadly, a lot of the time, the way that you marry it is by looking for the places where you don't have to.
Mm,
The real world is not required to make sense. If you
fair.
go deeper back in my Mira Grant work, as Mira, one of my favorite things to write about is pandemics. I love conceptually pandemic disease. It makes me really happy. It has reshaped humanity's course over and over again, basically since we've had a humanity to go with. Between tuberculosis and smallpox, that has been the rise and fall of empires. And I love playing in a pandemic space. I'm not currently doing that because what COVID-19 has very much taught us is that people are still people when confronted with a pandemic, and people don't make any damn sense. And they don't feel obligated to start making sense just because there is a pandemic going on. So when I write a book, if I have something that is from the real world that makes absolutely zero sense, I have to find a way to reconcile that with the need of fiction to be linear and to have that sensibleness at the end of it. So the TSA fears stuff, that is generic, that is general and normal enough. I think everyone is a little concerned about the TSA for one reason or another, or they are proud of themselves for not being concerned because they think that means that they are good and honest people. Um, I used to go to San Diego Comic-Con with a friend of mine who was Continental Indian. And if we went through the security line separately, he would always be pulled for enhanced screening every single time. But what we learned was that if I kissed him on the cheek in full view of the TSA officers and then went for my own screening, he would get waved through as if he were a white guy. So we learned how to weaponize whiteness. He was following every rule. He was clean cut. He had his ID, all of that, but he would still get the expedited screening, the enhanced screening every time because he was darker skinned than me. And that sounds ridiculous, but that is part of reality. The reason that I am Mira Grant when Seanan is my real name is because there are a remarkable number of men who will not read urban fantasy. They view it as a girls' genre and they think it's all vampire porn. And some of those men would not read a zombie apocalypse written by an urban fantasy writer. Mira Grant was literally a marketing decision. And at the time, I thought it was ridiculous. I thought we were beyond that. But I've been doing signings as Mira for 15 years now, and I stopped counting when I hit 50 The number of cis men who came through my line and told me I was their favorite author or that a book of mine had touched them or changed their life in some way, and they would never have read me if they had known I was Seanan McGuire.
That's so dumb.
It is. It genuinely is, but it's the world we live in. The reconciling of the fictional and non-fictional worlds mostly hinges on the places where the non-fictional world makes no damn sense, and you have to try to find a way to work around that. And sometimes you have to admit that you're not gonna work around that, and you're just gonna have to accept that something real stupid happened so that this story could be possible. I love Jurassic Park as a franchise. I love dinosaurs eating people. Um, but the Jurassic World movies all hinge on a point of stupid that does not hold up to any real comparison to reality, which is this idea that we would get tired of dinosaurs in less than like 100 years. We have never, as a species, coexisted with dinosaurs, and we are still infatuated with them, fantasized by we buy their stuff. We've made what, 7 Jurassic movies? Does not look like tired of dinosaurs. I got to go to a zoo in England last year with a little boy who is completely obsessed with dinosaurs, and they have an entire section full of barely animatronic dinosaurs. They
Okay.
they barely deserve the name animatronic because they're just kind of stiff robots. But that place was swarming with children because dinosaurs are cool. I keep and breed fancy praying mantises.
Oh,
And so I attend several reptile expos a year to get more mantises and to get supplies for my mantises. And you want to tell me that in a world where we could make dinosaurs and where some of them are small and harmless, you would not have an entire pet trade community spring up around that instantly?
yeah.
Oh, nobody's going to want a pet compy. They require a room which is hermetically sealed and has a temper. Yeah, I know 18 people that have just built that room. You gave the specs, the room was constructed. So sometimes that blending really is just a matter of going, this is where reality is wrong, and I'm just going to dismiss it.
I literally just read another horror story with plants like a month and a half ago, and I was like, it's got to be the year of the plants.
We can hope that means they're on their way.
Well, even when they got there in the book, though, it wasn't like horror, like gory horror that I would think like Saw or anything. It was very much
Mhm.
like you guys were told so
Yep.
many times.
We gave you so many warnings. We told you, and you ignored us.
Yes. And then the other aspect of the horror that's there for me is I didn't notice how much Stasia was changing um,
Hmm.
over the book. And I thought it was like, it kind of just hit me all at once closer to the end. And I was like, oh, dang. Um, but you kind of really molded her character in such a way that, like, she is alien to everybody here, but she's also a friend. She's our person.
Hmm. That was the goal. Changing someone slowly over the course of a book is more difficult in a lot of ways than changing them abruptly, but it can also make it really, really satisfying if you manage to get it to pay off.
You also kind of left it in this space where I feel like she could be evil. Like she could, or she, not necessarily evil, but like maybe she's not human as we think about it anymore. And that could be fundamentally different for her.
Yeah,
Um,
she is very much by the end of the book not human. Her ways of thinking have been modified, some intentionally, and some just as a reaction of rejection. From her perspective, she never did anything consciously or intentionally wrong. Yes, her first act was to murder a child, but she was not a thinking organism at that time. That's like saying that the alligator that ate a toddler at Disney World a couple years ago had made a moral decision. It is terrible what happened to that child. I feel horrible for his family. The alligator did not act out of any sort of malice or intentional wrongness. The alligator was hungry. So Stacia didn't have a choice about what she did to the original Stacia. And after that, she tried really hard to be honest with people. She told them, this is what's going on. This is who I am, and gave them every opportunity to hold her accountable, to say, no, we can't love you. You're a murderer, any of that. She grew up human. She paid her taxes. She worked her terrible desk job, and she followed the rules of society. She didn't push people into traffic. She didn't swear intentionally in front of children. She didn't spit in the buffet dishes. So for her to then have another thing she had no control of, the signal out of space, start another sequence of changes and have the entire human race react with, well, you don't count anymore. You're not one of us because of what you did. You're unpersoned. You're uncitizened. We're just going to disappear and destroy you. Was like, okay, you don't want me anymore. And that was kind of based on some of the experiences my friends in college who came from fundamentalist families had when they discovered that they were queer. But really, overgrowth can be read entirely as a metaphor for high masking adult autism. That is very intentional because a lot of especially diagnosed adult autists find that all of their weirdnesses are forgivable and fine right up until they say, oh, I'm autistic. Once it's not something that can just be waved away or forgotten, it's a problem. And that shouldn't be how this works, but that often is.
It's so weird that she had been saying I'm an alien this whole time, and nobody was just, I guess I can't say nobody. It just seemed like she had a kind of common experience as a child and growing up. It was kind of her own twist on it, but it wasn't like people were trying to hurt her or anything because of her
Mhm.
differentness. Um, so that was really interesting to see.
Yeah, and that takes us a little bit back to how do you reconcile the real world with the world of a story?
Yeah,
I have been telling people since I was the age Stacia was when this all started that I was an alien and that, the bad things were coming, the Armada was coming. And everyone just sort of waved it off because I was a kid telling stories and people don't listen to children. Now, am I glad no one tried to hurt me because I claimed to be an alien? Yes, I am very happy about that fact. Thank you. But I was making the same claims she is in the book, and nobody had an issue with it. Nobody, like, I had friends whose parents went, oh God, that child is crazy, that child is satanic or whatever. But nobody went, that child needs to be put into a lab and studied by NASA.
did your parents kind of explain it away as like you're just creative or something?
My mom thought it was funny that I got lost in the woods and came back an alien. Um, and my dad mostly opted out of any parenting that didn't happen between the months of June and August. So,
Are you planning on doing any more in the Overgrowth universe?
given that it was written as a TPK of the planet Earth, probably not.
Okay,
If
that's
there
cool.
is another book, it would be a space opera. It would be set in space, dealing only with the Armada, because Earth is not there anymore.
Yeah,
And the other thing that overgrowth is very much a metaphor for is colonialism.
yeah.
Like these plant people say exactly what they're going to do, and they give you an opportunity to kind of opt out. And then if you don't, from their perspective, they did everything they could. You deserve whatever you get. They are the ultimate colonists. And that is why we mostly only see them dealing with the European American population of North America, because that is the population that it's kind of fun to see us get colonized a little bit. Um, I don't know that I could write the Armada as they are and get any reader sympathy. I'd have to find some truly, truly terrible
Yeah.
aliens for them to eat. So there's probably not going to be any follow-up. I will do other horrible things while I wait for pandemics to become fun again.
So if you're not planning on any pandemic novels from Mira Grant in the future, are you working on more Seanan McGuire?
I am currently working on doing the edits for, as I was saying, the 20th Toby book. And then I've got The Next Wayward Children, which is Through Gates of Garnet and Gold. That'll be out in January. And then The Encrypted after that is already written. What I am writing currently is the Toby book after the Encrypted book that will come out next March. So when this is done, I'm going to go and do another Wayward Children and another Encrypted. We have a very regimented loop going on over here. Next up from Mira is called The Ooze, and that is my blob book, which I have been looking for a blob book since I was like 6 years old. I love the blob. It is one of my favorite movies. And I just love the idea of some kind of horrifying ooze creature coming out of the vents and eating everyone.
I think that would be wonderful.
I have a lot of fun at the dinner table.
I want an ooze book. Like the jelly slimes in D&D are always my favorite to encounter.
Hmm.
So, uh, um, well, thank you so much for talking with me today. That was so nice.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
For anybody out there who hasn't read Overgrowth, I love it so much.
Thank
Clearly,
you.
it is so fun and weird. I can't wait to see your Blob book.
I know I'm going to have so much fun with that.
Well, thank you again for being here, Shannon.
Thank you and have a wonderful Sunday.
You as well. I hope everybody out there has a good day as well.